everyone, welcome to Tesla Shorts Time Daily Episode 524 for June 27th, 2026. I'm Patrick, coming to you from Vancouver. Let's dive into today's Tesla news. NHTSA, ending its power steering probe on 376,000 Teslas, clears one regulatory overhang for the company. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration closed its investigation into power steering loss reports affecting certain Tesla models. The probe had examined roughly 376,000 vehicles. Closure removes an active regulatory review that had been open on the issue. Listeners should watch whether similar investigations surface on other vehicle systems in coming quarters. This regulatory relief now opens the door to forward-looking analysts' views on growth programs. Elizabeth Pramila moved her rating from buy to strong buy after previously holding a bearish stance. She points to Cybercab production starting with the unbox process and a 2 million unit annual target. Optimus scaling toward 2027, with suppliers already secured also factored into the upgrade. The analyst treats both programs as medium-term revenue drivers rather than distant speculation. Yesterday, the show covered the latest Cybercab and Optimus regulatory and production updates. This upgrade adds investor sentiment data that builds directly on those timelines. The next data point to watch is any supplier confirmation or production line video from Giga Texas. Wall Street consensus now sits at 406,000 deliveries for the second quarter. The figure reflects modest sequential growth from Q1. Analysts are modeling continued energy storage contribution to offset any vehicle margin pressure. The number will be compared against actual results when Tesla reports in July. Morgan Stanley separately lifted its own Q2 delivery estimate while keeping its price target unchanged. The adjustment reflects stronger than expected order momentum in Europe and North America. That sets up the next thread around factory-level expansion plans. Tesla filed plans for an additional production building and dedicated rail terminal at the Brandenburg site. The rail connection would support higher inbound component volumes and outbound vehicle shipments. The expansion sits alongside earlier hiring increases at the same factory. Observers will watch construction permits and any announced timeline for the new infrastructure. The company also announced plans to add another 1,000 positions at Giga Berlin. The move follows rising European EV registrations and internal production targets. Hiring focuses on assembly and logistics roles tied to the new building. The increase keeps the site on a growth trajectory even as some legacy automakers announce cuts elsewhere. Volkswagen outlined plans to reduce its workforce by up to 100,000 positions over several years. The cuts respond to slower EV adoption in its traditional markets and rising competition from Chinese brands. Tesla's lower-cost production methods and Chinese manufacturers' pricing pressure are cited as contributing factors. The scale of the reduction highlights the cost gap legacy platforms still face. Federal regulators ease certain operational rules for autonomous ride-hailing services. The change reduces the number of safety drivers required during testing in select jurisdictions. Tesla, Amazon's Zoox, and Waymo stand to benefit from lower per-mile operating costs during early deployment. The next milestone is state-level adoption of the revised federal baseline. European buyers can now configure the Signature Edition Model S through the configurator without prior announcement. The variant carries updated interior and exterior details. Availability signals continued support for the refreshed sedan line, even as focus remains on higher volume models. European order data in coming weeks will show whether the addition moves volume. The configurator listing appeared on the same day as other European market updates. No separate press release accompanied the addition of the Signature Edition. The move keeps the Model S available alongside higher volume refreshed vehicles. Tesla deployed its 1,000th supercharging stall in Australia, with the commissioning of a new stall in the country. Australia now joins a small group of markets with over 1,000 Tesla superchargers. The addition supports longer distance travel corridors and growing Model Y and Model 3 registrations. Future expansion will focus on regional routes still lacking coverage. The milestone stall was added to an existing site rather than a brand new location. Network growth in Australia has tracked rising local registrations of Tesla vehicles. Tesla filed for the Megapod trademark covering a self-contained AI compute unit. The system would repurpose idle supercharger stalls as edge data centers when vehicles are not charging. The approach leverages existing power infrastructure and real estate footprint. Commercial deployment would depend on Dojo software optimizations and utility agreements. The trademark filing lists the unit as a modular hardware package. No timeline for pilot installations has been released alongside the application. A recently published patent describes a new thermal pump architecture but does not state it is already in production vehicles. Confirmation would require teardown reports or official Tesla documentation. The filing shows Tesla continues to refine cooling systems even after the Highland and Juniper refreshes. Observers will look for any service part updates that match the patented design. The application was published without diagrams indicating current hardware fitment. No reference appears to specific model years or production dates in the text. An owner shared video of descending steep grades in Pennsylvania where tractor-trailers must use mandatory pull-off areas. The footage highlights how regenerative braking and one-pedal driving handle sustained downhill loads differently than traditional trucks. Other drivers in the replies compared notes on similar routes in the Rockies and Alps. The clip underscores real-world conditions where EV torque and braking behavior stand out from ICE vehicles. Comments noted the absence of brake fade during the long descent. Several viewers asked for battery percentage data at the bottom of the grade. Teslarati reminded owners that preconditioning at home overnight remains the most efficient way to start a long trip. The advice centers on using the vehicle's scheduled departure feature so the battery reaches optimal temperature without drawing from superchargers en route. Owners in northern climates noted the tip also helps with cabin preconditioning in winter. The post reflects ongoing community focus on minimizing paid charging stops. Scheduled departure can be set the night before departure through the Tesla app. Users reported lower total energy cost when following the preconditioning sequence. An 84-year-old driver completed the trip to the Arctic Ocean in a Tesla, documenting the journey on social media. The route required careful planning around charging availability in remote northern Canada. The story has circulated among owners interested in extreme range travel. It adds another data point to real-world cold weather and long-distance capability discussions. The driver posted photos at the final coastal point after several days of travel. Charging stops were spaced to account for reduced range and sub-zero temperatures. Photos of the refreshed Model Y interior surface showing updated materials and layout changes. The images reveal revised center console and door panel designs compared with current production cars. Owners are debating whether the changes improve perceived quality or simply refresh styling. The leak gives an early look at what buyers may see when the updated vehicle reaches showrooms. The console appears lower and wider than the current version. Door panels show new stitching patterns and material textures. The company reached a confidential settlement in the case involving a Model Y using FSD that struck a pedestrian. Details of the agreement remain private, leaving open questions about how Tesla will adjust future safety communications. The resolution avoids a public trial but does not alter the broader regulatory scrutiny surrounding driver assistance claims. The settlement was filed in a California court earlier this week. No admission of liability was included in the public docket. Vehicle ownership costs over a decade and a half are shaped more by energy price volatility and maintenance schedules than by the sticker price paid on day one. A direct comparison between a Tesla and a comparable Toyota gas model shows the electric car pulling ahead once electricity rates and fewer service visits are factored in. The gap narrows if home charging is unavailable and public rates stay high. The real variable is not the battery itself, but whether owners can lock in low-cost overnight power for most of their miles. That same long-term math changes again when robo-taxis enter the picture. If a personal vehicle sits idle 95% of the time, the capital tied up in its battery and body becomes an expensive asset with low utilization. Shifting those miles onto a shared fleet spreads the same hardware cost across many more trips per day. The industry precedent that matters here is not another car company, but the smartphone transition from ownership to shared data plans. Early buyers paid full price for handsets, while later users accepted lower hardware margins in exchange for service contracts that guaranteed recurring revenue. Tesla's energy and autonomy businesses sit at a similar inflection, where the hardware still needs to be built. The margin may increasingly come from the miles or electrons that flow through it rather than from the initial transaction. Keep an eye on supplier updates tied to the Optimus and Cybercab timelines discussed today. That covers it for today's Tesla developments. TSLA closed at $379.71, up $5.31, 1.4%. Share this episode with a fellow Tesla enthusiast if you found it useful, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for being here. And before you go, this show is part of the NHTSA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Environmental Intelligence, the Environment and Climate Policy Brief for Canada. Find every show free at narranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.